Hello everyone, my name is Roya and today I'm going to be telling you about the worst books that I read in 2018. These are two one-star books and two 2.5 or 2-star books, and there really are a couple of other 2-star books that should be on this list as well, but I realized that I have nothing to say about them other than I didn't like, the world building didn't make any sense and they were boring and blah, blah, blah. But those, for reference, are Becoming the Dragon by Alex Sapegin and The Scorpion Rules by Erin Bow. But anyway, I do have 4 actual books I'm going to talk to you guys about today. Funny enough, 3 of them are by some of my favorite authors who also got 5 stars from me this year for different books. We are just going to get right into it, and I will tell you guys all about these books and why I disliked them so much. The first one I'm going to tell you guys about today is One Good Night by Mercedes Lackey. And as you guys probably know, Mercedes Lackey is one of my favorite authors of all time. I've loved her books since forever. So why did I dislike this one so much? Well, the first half of the book was actually okay. Like, I probably would have given the first half about 3 stars, but the second half is where it got really terrible. So, first of all, there is terrible queer rep. Not the worst queer rep I've ever read, because that is coming up later in this video, but still pretty terrible. Specifically, the main character, who is a girl, falls in love with a dude and or is attracted to a dude, rather. She's not really in love, but she definitely admits being attracted to him. And then when it turns out that this dude is a chick, that's just never mentioned again. And I am just so not cool with that, because if she was that attracted to him as a man, why wasn't she attracted to them as a woman? And then they both fall in love with dragons, and it comes out of absolutely nowhere. And basically, like, half the stuff that happens in this book comes out of absolutely nowhere, and it makes no sense. So it's full of plot holes, full of just stuff that did not work. If you want good Mercedes Lackey recommendations, I do have a video all about where to start with Mercedes Lackey, and it is not this one. The next one I'm going to tell you guys about is Suspicion by Alexandra Munir. Again, another one of my favorite authors. I actually discovered her books this year, and I loved 2 of her books, the other 2 that I read. And then I read this one, and I was like, what is this crap? I'm sorry. This one, the main thing that made it fall flat, I think, was the presence of the main character's magic that had nothing to do with the rest of the story. Like, literally, the story would have been the exact same with or without it. And so this book took a good chunk of its only like 200 and something pages to talk about this magic system that had nothing to do with the story, had no bearing on the plot whatsoever, and also it's just not that well thought out of a book overall. There are some plot holes and a romance that also made very little sense. So now we're going to get into the books that got 1 star from me. War Prize by Elizabeth Vaughn. And this, basically my main problem with this book is that it's really, really rapey the entire way through. I was really excited to read this. This was actually a 5-star prediction. I totally thought I was going to love it because I love fantasy romance. But unfortunately, this book just sucked. So there was very little romance. There were a lot of really rapey parts, like the main character being repulsed by and aroused by the same person at the same time, and I thought that was like really weird and described really terribly. And then even worse, the book practically starts with her being assaulted in an alleyway, and she's thinking like, oh shit, I'm gonna get raped, but like they basically just hold a knife to her throat and ask her for information. She's not really getting raped, and she's like, oh man, I thought I was being raped. And I was like, dude, that's not how that works at all, and that's hugely problematic that it was portrayed that way, because we already have a bunch of douchey guys just in the world running around thinking that rape and sex are the same thing, and they are not. Like, there are legitimately people who say things like, and if you're triggered by rape, don't listen to this, but there are legitimately people who say things like, oh, well, at least she got laid, when no, she didn't. It hurts. That shit hurts, man. It's not good, okay? So, like, no. just know with this whole book, and I actually DNF'd it about 3/4 of the way in because I was just not gonna sit through another quarter of the book if it's like that. Now, the moment you guys have all been waiting for, the worst book of the year. And arguably one of the absolute worst books I think I've ever read in my life. And again, by one of my favorite authors who I normally love and who I've never given a rating under 3 stars and who actually got 5 stars in the same year for a different book as well. And I have not talked about this in a video yet because I just read this book. It was my last read of 2018. But if you guys follow me on Twitter, you know what I'm talking about. And that is The Immortal Prince by Jennifer Fallon. Where do I even start with how bad this book is? So, there's terrible queer rep. Let's start there. So, we have 2 queer main characters, or side characters. They're basically main characters. I don't know. So, we have a bisexual character who is basically the closest thing we have to a villain in this book because there's no plot and really no villain. But he's basically the closest thing we have to a villain. And he literally, like, flirts with a 15-year-old girl when he's, like, probably 30. And then, and anything from his point of view is, like, totally slut-shaming just everybody. And he's basically sleeping with the gay character who is married to a woman who knows that he's gay and is totally understanding of it. But, when it comes to the production of an heir, which there's a lot of pressure on them to have a child, he literally can't even touch a woman, like as in not even hold hands with a woman. And that's not how being gay works. Women in this book are also treated really terribly, and I will tell you, as an avid reader of adult fantasy and adult historical fiction, I am pretty desensitized to a lot of the ways that women are treated in like a medieval-esque society and whatnot. So the fact that this is just so bad, like the women in this book are treated really terribly, is saying something. So the worst part probably is the fact that there's like a 15-year-old girl who is constantly flirted with by men, and men in their points of views constantly are, like, she flirts with like older men, like men twice her age probably, and they're constantly like in their points of views, they're constantly being like, oh, is that what they learn at a women's school or whatever it was she went to and whatnot, and they just constantly say stuff like that about her, and it's pretty messed up, and I like cringed every time. And then the rape in this book is quite possibly worse than it was in War Prize, which I just talked about. We even get heroes of the story, like the main characters, thinking that a woman being raped actually is experiencing the same pleasure that a man is getting, which they are not. So there are some like really gross fucking quotes in this. I'm not kidding you. I even like posted one of them on my Twitter, and a bunch of people were like, ew, this is so gross, what the fuck is this? And yeah, rightly so, because what the fuck is this? Like, what kind of book has that in it? It's kind of messed up, to be honest. I don't think I've ever seen something like that in my life. And as if that weren't bad enough, this has the worst, most insensitive exploration of the theme of slavery that I think I have ever encountered in my life. So basically there's this race of animal people that were created by these like godlike people to be slaves, basically. And so these animal people, they're like humanoid animals, basically, and they have been enslaved for thousands of years. That was the whole reason they were even brought into existence. And the way that they're treated is just really terrible, because, I mean, the comparison of slaves to animals is, like, really disgusting, to be honest, and it made me hella uncomfortable the entire time I was reading it. And as if that's not even... that. And they're treated really terribly overall. And actually, on that note, there's even a mention of bestiality, and even though it doesn't happen on scene, it is described somewhat detailed, like, and it is very, very gross and really disturbing. And the book itself, like as a storytelling, you know, format, whatever, is also really terrible. It's full of plot holes. I literally wanted to make a list of plot holes and so that I could count how many of them there were, but because I stopped reading like 4/5 of the way through this book, I stopped. I figured that wasn't really worth it. But also, there are huge chunks of just really boring backstory. I have never, I even have said this in a video before, I have never in my life skipped a chapter of a book in my life. I am offended of that even being a concept, and yet I skipped a chapter of this book because this book was so boring. My gods. So seriously, guys, I do have a couple of videos about Jennifer Fallon's books and where to start with them. Do not start with this one. Do not read this one. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not even like eye this book in a store. Do not even think about reading this. I swear to God, you will be disturbed for the rest of your life. Anyway. So anyway, those are my worst reads of 2018. I really hope your worst reads were not quite this bad, but whatever. So let me know what your worst read of the year was, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye.